Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. This is part 2 of our series on Lightspeed Voice. On today's show, we have Jacob Smith
Hello, everyone.
and Bogus Handzel.
Hello.
If you missed part 1 of our series on Lightspeed Voice, please go back and give it a listen to hear more from Jacob. For part 2, we turn to a mutual customer of HawkSoft and Lightspeed Voice to learn how Lightspeed is used inside a real independent insurance agency. Bogus Handzel is the Chief Operating Officer of Handzel Associates Insurance. At the risk of Bogus hanging up, I'm going to be sincere in my admiration of our agency guest today. To me, Bogus Handzel is an example of the best kind of independent insurance professional. Handzel Associates was founded in 1989 by Greg Handzel, Bogus's father. Bogus joined the family business in 2005, but was involved frequently at an early age, joining his father in the office to help with random tasks. He has worked every job in the agency, from entry-level positions to becoming an agent to his current role as Chief Operating Officer. Today, Bogus works alongside his brother Lucas in guiding the direction of the agency. As a second-generation agency principal, Bogus works hard to maintain the goodwill and legacy of the agency, while also refining the process, technology, and community engagement for Handzel Associates. As a final important point to our listeners, Bogus is an unabashedly proud dog owner who never fails to show me new photos of his Newfoundland dog, Coco, who has been bouncing around prior to us hitting record. I will say he's also a proud father of 2 great kids and a loving husband. I just see a lot more photos of the dog. That's all I'm saying. Bogus is also an amazing ambassador for the Chicagoland area, was a really great host to HawkSoft and the Hug organization when we were back there in 2023. He's a member of the Hug board, does an amazing amount of community service for his community. I'm sure he'll talk about that more, but I really cannot say enough good things about my friend Bogus.
Thank you. I appreciate being called a friend, but I do have one correction for you, Kenny.
Sure.
She, as she walks in the background there, she is part Newfoundland. So she's a Leonberger. Newfoundland.
Right, I knew that. Okay, Jeff.
Great Pyrenees and St.
Take it from the
Bernard.
top.
That's the mix.
I knew that. Why did I'm never gonna live that down. That's the end of my podcasting career. I got a dog wrong. JP's gonna give me crap about it. Jeff's gonna give me crap about it. Bogus is never gonna let me see his dog.
I mean,
ever
you're
again.
right. It's part Newfoundland.
Well then, I guess that means that we have to talk about insurance stuff. Initially, when I was writing the introduction, I was like, I'm going to talk about how much I love Handzel Associates. I think that you guys serve a very important community. You serve a very important niche. But then I realized, I need Bogus to talk about this at the top of the show. So, like we talked with Jacob about in part 1, story is important. And the reason it's very important to this particular side of our show is we want listeners to understand how alike and similar, or not alike and dissimilar, they are from Bogus, to understand Bogus's perspective on the other questions we have. So, Bogus, I'd love for you to take this opportunity to tell us about your agency. What got it started? How many people work there now? What do you specialize in? All those fun things.
Yeah, of course. Like you mentioned, we started in '89. My father had a dream of creating a better life for his family. He had immigrated over from Poland, caught wind that the auto insurance law was coming into effect in Illinois. That weekend before that law came into effect, he made a written commitment of $20,000 in premium. So you're shaking his boots, didn't know how he was ever going to commit to that and provide that much premium to the carrier with one company here in Illinois. That day that law was about to come into effect is he had a line out the door for 3.5 hours. Sold 114 paper apps and came home with $40,000 in cash because the bank was closed. So in that first year of just selling one carrier liability only here in Illinois, he wrote over $1 million in non-standard liability only premium. and that kind of just took off. We serve the Polish community here in the Chicagoland area. We currently have 29 team members. We're probably going to be onboarding a 30th next week here. My team is bilingual and trilingual, so my day to day is spoken in Polish with a little bit of Ukrainian mixed in. The only time I'm speaking English is when I'm talking to our vendor contacts or HawkSoft or Lightspeed or our carriers. But the majority of it is in Polish. And as Polish families immigrated over to the States and started creating livelihoods for themselves, we started adding additional products. And we grew from a non standard agency to being a full service shop for everybody.
That's awesome. And I love, like, I really can't understate how committed you are to your community. I know there's a lot of events that you host. There's a lot of events you participate in. Um, what gets you excited about insurance? Because you grew up around it. Like, there's probably not a lot of new things in the business of insurance for you, but you're still a passionate agent. What gets you excited about it?
You know what? I think it's twofold for me. I think that one, and I think you know this, and Jacob's probably seen a little bit of it from the Hawks Nest retreat, is that I've got a passion for the industry as a whole.
Mm,
I'm in my own little bubble and my niche, and I can only do so much. But being able to help agencies across the states is absolutely fantastic. And sharing processes and brainstorming and saying, hey, I went through that issue before. This is how I approached it, and this is what the outcome was. From an actual internal standpoint, providing for the team, I think that's
mm,
the biggest thing for me. They're all team members. They're all have a different seat on the bus, and we're all trying to get to a better place. And then for our clients is making sure that when something does occur, that it isn't a financial burden for them, that it's there for the reason that it's supposed to be there.
mm,
But yeah, it's like I said, insurance isn't sexy by any means. So trying to keep the flame going, trying to push it on, and trying to get some minds thinking about how to make this a real livelihood for any sort of business owner moving forward.
absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much. And I hope, I think that that resonates with a lot of people. You're a second generation agency principal. Um, I think one of the things that I really appreciate is how much thought and attention you put into the business. In part one, you mentioned that you tend to maybe overanalyze or over scrutinize new technology that comes on. Um, I think listeners would be a little shocked to hear how many technology vendors do you use inside Handzel Associates.
Technology vendors or integrated partners, I guess.
Let's say integrated partners, integrated with HawkSoft.
Two.
Yeah. And I think that when I learned that, I was like, oh, shocking, because I think of you as an innovator and as a very forward thinking agency owner. And I think what I really appreciate about your approach is that it demonstrates that you can be that and also not be the person chasing the shiny object. I want to take you back to the when you were evaluating phone systems. And I want to uncover the hurdles you were encountering and the issues you were facing when you first encountered Lightspeed. What were you looking for when you um, encountered Lightspeed Voice?
So when we started implementing changes in the agency, and like you said, I do tend to overanalyze things. What's been fantastic being able to work with family and my brother specifically is we're very different in the way that we approach things. So what he taught me
Mm,
to do is to get to 70% of the way and then refine the remaining 30%. So get it out
mm,
there, get 70%, approve it, let the team play with it. And as we kind of work through those use case scenarios, we can now fine tune it to get as close to 100% as possible, which for me was like, okay, I'm trying to come in and change things in the agency. Like, how do I give up that 30% control? But that's what really moved things forward. When we looked at new phone systems, we were coming over from a traditional copper line system. So the cost savings was the major driver. At that point, and I think we've been with Lightspeed Voice maybe since late 2017, 2018, right before we joined HawkSoft. We were paying tens of thousands of dollars for our phone system that didn't have any capability. So that was probably the driving factor. I know
mm,
that I had evaluated a couple of other vendors, but I don't remember who it was because it's been such a fantastic working, with with Lightspeed. So everything kind of fell into place when HawkSoft kind of moved along in their journey, and API became a big thing. And
Hmm.
Lightspeed was the first to say, "Hey, we need to be on here." And
Hmm.
then that just relationship kind of grew and grew and grew. So being able to provide not only Lightspeed but HawkSoft those use case scenarios, how an agency is going to use the system to
Hmm.
better the agency experience and process and lessen the burden on their teams has been
Hmm.
fantastic to be able to have that line of communication, because a lot of companies don't do that. They don't allow you to have that line of communication open.
Yeah. Um, and we talk a lot about that in part one, so I don't want to go back over it too much. But it sounds like to me like you've been with Lightspeed for a long time. What is maintaining that commitment to them as your phone system or as your telecommunications system?
Right now, I think it's the willingness to listen. Um, you as vendors, as if a phone vendor or a management system vendor is, you're getting yelled at from 10,000 different directions, a million different things, and figuring out what is the one thing to hone in on and listen and say, okay, this kind of makes sense. I really make it my goal to make sure that when I do say, hey, maybe this is a better route, it's not to drive my agency's purpose, but to drive everybody's purpose. It needs to work for all agencies across the board. It can't just work for me, because that way it's just going to bottleneck the system. And then there's going to be someone who's going to be the complete opposite 180 of wanting to do that. Now they're going to switch it. Then I'm going to be angry, or that agency is going to be angry. So it has to encompass everybody. The willingness to listen and problem solve, I think, is the real commitment there. If they're willing to hear what your client needs and expects from you, that's going to make your business better. And I think HawkSoft and Lightspeed have both found themselves in a very interesting place, because you traditionally have that with a small business. A small business wants to make sure that the customer, it's done right in the customer's eyes, until it gets to a certain point, and then you're starting to look at, how do I continue to drive the product and innovation, but that customer voice kind of starts getting quieter and quieter and quieter. Both companies here, HawkSoft and Lightspeed, have been able to maintain customer voice being number one importance to drive their product. So it's not cutting costs, trying to implement something that no one's going to use. It's having the innovation being driven by what their clients need to see happen, which is
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. So those things really tie into making sure that I choose my partners very specifically.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that you have to be deliberate in the business decisions you make, and you have to like own them. And I think that is something that Lightspeed Voice and Hawksoft share, is this decision that like we could as companies probably operate in a more aggressive way potentially, and target maybe the easier path, which would be like, okay, just jumping on each subsequent like uh fad and like growing the system that way, or growing it very wide with not a lot of feature depth, but it doesn't create long-term customers. Just like if you were servicing your clients and you kept book rolling to whatever the best commission was without really thinking about like, oh, is this best for the, are these the best premium volume, or is this the best coverage options, are these the best companies to be doing business with, like there's that trade-off. And I think making those business decisions resonates with our audience really well, where we're saying like, well, we'd rather be a little slower but be committed to this audience, this very specific audience. Now I want to get more into the feature set, and I kind of have a particular question that maybe we want to go down, but this might be a two-parter. We might sneak in a sixth question here. First and foremost, platforms tend to be rather expansive, feature rich. I know Lightspeed Voice does a lot to streamline business communication for an agency. What can Handzel and Associates do now with Lightspeed Voice that you couldn't do before you had them? But as an extra addition to this, what are features that you're using today in Lightspeed Voice that maybe didn't exist when you first started using them that you're excited about?
That's a good question. I think starting with the first one, being in our specific niche, customer service goes a long way. When we started our agency, all the carrier contracts we used to have, they used to be direct. You didn't have these aggregators that would give you access to these carriers. Now you have smaller agencies with the same carriers that you do, so it's been
Mm,
becoming a little bit more of a competitive market for
mhm,
agencies. So customer service or client service is at the forefront of everything we do. Now it's kind of like that iceberg, drawing, right?
mhm,
Everything that you see or you don't see underneath is everything we're putting forward towards improving that process, and the customer only
mhm,
sees 10%.
mhm,
So how do we make that a forward process that the client is able to see?
mhm,
And one of those things is being really reactive to knowing and making sure that we know what language preference the client prefers.
mm,
So building out our IVR, when it rings on our phones, it displays the language preference. When we pick the phone up, it just opens up that client account in HawkSoft, where it also displays that language preference. So that client care associate that's picking up that phone call already knows to start in Polish, in Russian, Ukrainian, or the person that does speak that language knows that that's the one we should be picking up. Or if let's say
mm,
it's a trucking client, it should go to the trucking team.
mm,
So implementing and stacking those feature sets has been
mhm.
fantastic to making sure that we're trying to do the best that we can. Because there's nothing more frustrating than having to transfer someone over back and forth because it just gets off on the wrong foot. I think I've been lucky enough to be able to see the functionality in Lightspeed and Hawksoft together grow from the beginning. Not to say anything, but I think that the phone pops, I think I may have been one of the first two that kind of played with it to make sure that
It
it
wouldn't
worked.
surprise me. Yeah.
The same thing with the integration on logging stuff.
Mhm,
So as both companies have kind of progressed in their journey of the product, I've been able to kind of see how that implements with the two of you guys.
mhm.
And that's been fantastic. So everything that they have now, I didn't have back then. Same thing with Hawksoft. Everything that
Yeah.
Hawksoft has right now, it's a completely different product. It might
Yeah.
look the same visually, and I always joke that I found the original version on the Wayback Machine, and you can still download it of HawkSoft 1.0, where it has Paul Hawkins' address and the
Yeah.
auto tab,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So everything looks the same. It just improved over time, which
Yeah.
is fantastic.
Jacob, I want to throw it over to you to check in on this. I'm curious your experience, as the Western regional person for Lightspeed, you probably encounter a lot of multilingual customers. Um, is Handzel and Associates unique in their need for multi-language support, or do you see that a lot in independent agencies?
Yeah, no, I definitely see it a lot. Obviously, the Spanish is definitely going to be the most prevalent. But yeah, absolutely. When it comes to having that IVR set up where you can have it actually go to specific people in the agency, obviously, Bogus, it sounds like everybody in the agency is bilingual or trilingual, where a lot of agencies, they may have some, just English speakers and then some of the English and Spanish speakers as well. And that's something that we can set up when they call into the agency, they press one, for Spanish. We can have that call routed to the Spanish speaking agents inside that agency. And then they press two for English. We can have them, sent to the better English speakers in the agency. So we can make it really simple. And hearing, the use case that Bogus uses it was, that's really cool as well.
Yeah, this is one of my private missions internally at HawkSoft. Fans of the show will know that I do speak a second language. I speak Japanese, and I used to work in foreign language education. Uh, Bogus, this is a banner I carry on your behalf frequently whenever I can. Um, I would love for us. You utilize tags, I believe, to identify that uh, preferred language or the primary language for the client. I would love that to be a part of our personal profiles. So, development team, product team, if you're listening to this episode, get it done. Come on, take it off the backlog. I digress. That does give us a little opening because I will say this is a dangerous question to ask a thoughtful individual like Bogus, but just like in part one, where we ask our partners to give their critical perspective on the industry, we want to give Bogus an opportunity to answer back um, with his perspective on the partner. Now, the caveat we always make is I think the most boring way you can answer this question is by talking about price. So we're gonna put price aside In an ideal world, we'd be in a post-scarcity Star Trek situation where all this cool technology would just be accessible. But servers cost money, data costs money, support is a huge driver of costs. So we're going to put price aside. Bogus. What is one thing that you would change about Lightspeed Voice if you could? Additionally, because I trust you, I will also say that you can definitely talk about HawkSoft in this answer. That's always an option, but I want to make it very clear for you, it is okay to talk about HawkSoft. I have thick skin.
The trust and the power in my hands right now. From a Lightspeed perspective, I think we start off this episode. You basically voicing your frustration that I only use 2 partners.
It's not
The
frustration.
only
I think
reason
it's admiration.
well, yeah, but also it's I'm sure there's a little frustration because I can kind of help from an agency perspective, but also it's also frustration on my behalf, right? The only reason why I use those 2 is because those are the 2 that support a process for a very niche agency in a niche world that I live in. The other one I use let me translate their system completely to Polish. So the frustration comes with I'm one tiny minnow in a giant stream, and yeah, I can help push your product along and give you ideas, but for me to actually use it, I need a very specific feature set, and not everybody's willing to kind of make those changes. So when I pick those partners, is because they listen. They may put it on the timeline and pipeline that it's going to be kind of done at some point, and that communication's open. I can't wait to use Nova. But for me, it's kind of progressing with the API and the AI behind it is that hopefully it'll get to a point where I can get that translated over in Polish.
Yeah.
Right. Because right now
Sure.
I get the call recordings for the voicemail, and me and my brother have a running joke sending each other because some of the words don't translate over the way that they should. And you're like, okay, well, I really kind of have to listen to this to make sure that is this what they said?
Is
Is something that I should put in the log or not? So I think that I know that's coming because I know that's something that's not in their hands for a developmental side. But that's what I'm looking forward to because that's going to really kind of cut back on the keystrokes for us, and that's probably the feature that I'm looking forward to the most.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. That was going to be my. I was going to ask you after the recording if the transcriptions can come back in Polish. If you could, this is a selfish question, but if you could improve specifically how Lightspeed Voice and HawkSoft integrate, beyond that, the logging of the call, what else would you want to see in that?
How far forward are we thinking here?
Let's say by 2026, what would be your ideal situation?
Give you guys
give us a year.
more than a year. I think if you could utilize the technology that Nova provides you and the AI capability to then create a task for a future conversation to recap the previous talking points that were recalled off that last conversation. That way it better preps the person or team member that's going to be making that phone call. I think that might be really fantastic use for that specific technology. And I think that you can get kind of creative with it if you start stacking templates on top of it.
Totally. I love that. So for listeners just who might not be on HawkSoft 6 yet, which is a very small percentage of HawkSoft customers at this point, but we suspenses, the old HawkSoft 5 nomenclature for a to-do item in HawkSoft 6 are called tasks, which are all collated into a task center. The API can create them. And so, Jacob, if you take this back to the team at Lightspeed Voice, have them reach out, and we can definitely talk about that because I know there's been some experiments done around what can be created, and so it's more likely than not. You'd be surprised to hear, Bogus. Okay, so
I think logically, like I can figure out where it's going to go.
Totally.
So I'm not setting the bar really high. It's going to be right there in the middle, and I think you guys can knock it out.
We appreciate that. Realistic expectations are like a blessing to development teams. Thank you so much. That wasn't the harshest thing to hear. Nevertheless, we want to use the fifth question as like the upswing, when we have that honest engagement about what could be different, what could be better. So Bogus, inclusive of the features, workflows, and any other tangible benefit that Lightspeed gives you, what value is your agency gaining through the partnership with Lightspeed Voice?
I don't think you can quantify the value just on the time saved. I think that's the biggest thing, right? For me, it's a smooth process. It needs to be a smooth process from A to Z, and I think that they help with that tremendously. Just being accessible, wherever and whenever, be it through the phone app, be it through Orbit, be it through Quantum, being it through a handheld phone. It just. I think if we had to move to a different system, I think we'd, other than changing agency management systems, would probably be the phone system would probably be the hardest because you've gotten so accustomed to all the features that you
Sure.
have. If you want to delete a voicemail or the 70 voicemails that have, piled up over the last, couple of months, click of a button, bulk delete. It's right there. It's gone. You forgot, you didn't remember who called in, or there was a client that didn't populate in HawkSoft. You've got, the CDR right there to kind of take a look at it. So just the time saved with all the feature sets is absolutely fantastic. I don't think you can quantify the amount of value that brings to me.
I think that is a great place for us to land here. Thank you, Bogus, for giving your perspective and your time today. I always appreciate when you take time away from the agency to talk with me, talk to HawkSoft, talk to Lightspeed Voice. We absolutely value your perspective. Jacob, thank you so much for being here and giving us a lot of great insight on Lightspeed Voice in part 1. Thank you to our listeners for tuning into today's episode. Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the video description below to learn more about our guests and to view the latest podcast episode as well as other content from HawkSoft. We appreciate you watching and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Thank you.